For the last century or so, global diplomats have essentially treated religion like like a glitch in the geopolitical matrix.
Right. Like a bug.
Exactly.
Huh.
It was viewed as this unpredictable, kind of antiquated bug that would just naturally, disappear as societies modernized and industrialized.
But that didn't happen.
No, not at all. And today, the highest level policymakers are realizing they had it completely backward.
Yeah, totally backward.
The very thing we often blame for our deepest global divisions might actually be the ultimate untapped resource for solving our most complex existential crises. Welcome to today's deep dive. I am your host, ready to explore this massive shift in how the world operates.
And I am your expert guide for this dive, and I have to say, it is a profound reframing.
It really is.
We're moving away from treating human belief as a liability, and we're starting to recognize it as, well, basically the base-level operating system required to keep the global network from crashing.
Which is a huge claim. And to understand how this is actually happening, we are pulling from a really comprehensive stack of source material today.
Yes, very comprehensive.
Specifically, it's a detailed report from a 2023 international panel event. This was hosted by the Geneva Center for Human Rights Advancement and Global Dialogue.
Right.
The report is titled Interfaith Dialogue and Reconciliation, and it is just packed with insights from global leaders, grassroots activists, academics.
The whole spectrum.
Yeah. So whether you are prepping for a policy meeting or trying to understand the dynamics of your local community board, or you are just insanely curious about human behavior, this deep dive is custom tailored for you. We are going to shortcut your way to understanding how faith is actually being used right now to build a better world.
And to give some context, according to Professor Fabio Petito, he's one of the experts in the panel, there is a totally new policy orientation happening at the highest levels of international relations.
Like a completely new approach.
Exactly. For a long time, the prevailing academic theory was the secularization thesis, which is just the idea that modernization would make religion wither away.
Which obviously proved entirely false.
Completely false. Belief hasn't gone anywhere. So rather than ignoring it, we are seeing the creation of new roles in ministries of foreign affairs all over the world.
Like where?
Oh, from France to the U.S. to Norway. They are specifically focused on religious engagement now.
I love that. Think of it like a massive software update for global diplomacy.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
For decades, the secular political world treated religion like a bug. Now they're realizing it is actually a core feature. They're finally reading the code instead of trying to delete it.
I completely agree. And Professor Petito points to a major milestone in this update, the 2019 document on human fraternity.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was co-signed by Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. And this sent a massive ripple through the Euro-Mediterranean world because it signaled a distinct shift.
A shift away from the old way of doing things.
Exactly. Interreligious dialogue is steadily moving away from polite, abstract theological debates behind closed doors.
The sort of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin stuff.
Right, right. And it's moving directly toward practical collaboration on pressing social issues.
Yeah.
So inclusive citizenship is becoming the primary goal rather than just theological agreement.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, that sounds wonderfully utopian at the Vatican or the United Nations.
Yeah.
But if the separation of church and state is so foundational to modern liberal democracies, isn't inviting religion back to the policy table playing with fire?
That tension right there. That is the central dilemma for modern secular states.
Because how do you include faith and state matters without just handing the microphone to the biggest, most traditional, most powerful religions?
Right. The ones with all the leverage.
Yeah. If the state gets involved, it seems inevitable that minority beliefs or, people with no religious affiliation at all just get left out in the cold.
Well, the report introduces a delightfully nuanced term that addresses this head-on. Reverend Søren Lenz from the Council of Europe uses the word interconvictional dialogue.
Interconvictional.
Yes.
Not interfaith, but interconvictional.
Yeah.
So what does that actually change in practice?
It implies a much wider umbrella. It expands the table to include not just organized traditional religions, but non-confessional, ideological, and humanistic organizations as well.
Oh, interesting.
The underlying premise is that everyone has convictions. Everyone has a set of values that guides their orientation in life.
Whether those values come from an ancient text or a modern philosophy.
Right. And Lenz argues that in a modern democracy, the state's role should absolutely not be to manage or validate these beliefs. The state's role should purely be as a facilitator of the spaces where these encounters happen.
So the state builds the table, but it doesn't cook the meal or tell you what to eat.
That is a perfect analogy, yes.
It just provides the infrastructure, maybe funding or neutral spaces like public schools or museums.
Right, so all these different convictional groups can interact and find the practical overlaps that support human rights.
And I really want to pause here to point out why this matters so much to you, the listener.
Yeah, this is key.
Even if you consider yourself strictly secular or an atheist or completely unaffiliated, this interconvictional shift means your worldview is now being explicitly recognized as a vital, active part of the civic ecosystem.
You aren't just a bystander.
Right. You aren't just an observer on the sidelines of a religious debate. Your humanist or secular convictions are considered a necessary part of the dialogue for societal health.
It levels the playing field significantly.
Yeah.
It really acknowledges that human coexistence requires dialogue between all operating systems of belief, not just the ones with the oldest temples.
But I have to ask, does this lofty interconvictional theory actually survive contact with the real world?
Well,
I mean, it's one thing to have a facilitated space in a polished European museum, but what happens when resources are scarce and people are actually angry? How does this work on the ground?
that is where Dr. Kizavino Aram's insights come in. She's the president of Shanti Ashram in India, and she emphasizes in the report that this dialogue only truly shines when it tackles concrete contemporary issues.
Like real-world problems.
Exactly. She highlights the global COVID-19 response. Religious and secular communities had to instantly drop abstract debates and just serve people on the front lines.
Regardless of their background.
Right. But an even more striking example from the text is a case study out of Bauchi State, Nigeria.
Okay, what happened in Bauchi State?
So there was a deep, ongoing, and violent dispute between farmers and herdsmen.
Wow.
And on the surface and in the media, this was often framed with strong religious and ethnic overtones, which is pretty common.
Right.
You have a Muslim-majority region, but the conflict lines get tangled up with livelihood, territory, and identity.
So how did an interconvictional approach actually solve a violent territorial dispute? I imagine putting a bunch of theologians in a room to debate scripture wouldn't stop people from fighting over their livelihood.
It wouldn't, and that's the point. The mediation involved both religious and non-religious groups, and their solution had nothing to do with theology.
What did they do?
They facilitated the building of a dam. Yes. The mediators realized the root of the friction wasn't whose version of God was correct. It was resource scarcity. It was access to water.
So they basically reframed a holy war into a survival issue.
Exactly.
But how do you actually get two warring factions to put down their weapons and agree to pour concrete together?
What's fascinating here is how this illustrates a psychological mechanism brought up by another panelist, Dr. Sherdo Gill. She references Ken Gergen's concept of relational being.
Relational being, okay.
The idea is that we actually understand the other best through coaction, doing things with and for each other.
Action over words.
Right. When you are sweating next to someone, hauling materials to build a dam that will water both of your crops, your brain cannot easily sustain the cognitive dissonance of demonizing that person.
Because they're helping you survive.
Exactly. The abstract fear of their otherness starts to evaporate because the shared physical task forces you to see their humanity.
It's less about debating whose map of the universe is right and more about agreeing to build a road together so everyone can get to town. And when you combine that psychological mechanism with the sheer logistical scale of these organizations, it's mind-blowing. I was looking at a statistic in the source material. 59% of U.S.-based international development organizations are faith-based.
59%. That operational weight is immense.
It's massive.
They have networks that reach into the most remote villages. They have deep, multi-generational community trust.
Right. Stuff the government just doesn't have.
Exactly. They have an inherent capacity to mobilize resources that secular governments often struggle to match. So when that network moves from abstract dialogue to physical coaction, the impact is structural, not just emotional.
But if coaction is so effective, if building dams and pouring concrete together dissolves fear, why is there still so much friction globally?
That's the big question.
What actively blocks this from happening everywhere?
The report addresses the darker side of this dynamic, too. Ignorance of other people's values creates a vacuum, and that vacuum is rapidly filled by fear.
Fear is a powerful motivator.
Very. Dr. Bakri Sambe, the regional director of the Timbuktu Institute, provided a really sharp diagnosis of this when asked about the causes of radicalization in Africa.
What did he say?
He described it as a combination of arrogance on the part of the unjust and ignorance on the part of the victim.
Arrogance of the unjust and ignorance of the victim. Let's unpack that because it sounds a bit academic.
Sure.
What does that actually look like in a local community?
Well, imagine a scenario where a minority community holds no political power and the ruling class dismisses their grievances. That is the arrogance of the unjust.
Right.
On the flip side, the marginalized community, isolated and lacking access to broader education or interaction, develops a warped, monolithic view of anyone outside their group. That is the ignorance.
I see.
When fear of the other takes root in that ignorance, political elites find it incredibly easy to instrumentalize. They stir up distrust to guarantee their own socioeconomic advantages.
Or to win elections by creating demonizing narratives. They point at the other to distract from their own corruption or policy failures, which actually brings up a case study in the text that I really want to push back on.
Oh, the Spain case.
Yes. There is a story about Lleida, a city in Spain, which seems to prove that government involvement in these dialogues can actually make things much worse.
You're talking about the Municipal Assembly of Religions.
Yes. The city council in Lleida created this assembly to foster dialogue, explicitly to get all the religious leaders trusting each other and acting as a consultative committee for the city.
Right.
It sounds like the perfect interconvictional model you were talking about earlier, the state building the table.
On paper, yes.
But then the city council completely bypassed this newly created assembly to make a major policy decision.
Yeah, they did.
They instituted a ban on full-face veils in public spaces, and they did it without consulting the assembly they had just built. So doesn't this just validate the skeptics?
Oh, you mean?
Doesn't this show that when governments facilitate dialogue, it's often just a PR tool to manage minorities, while the state just pushes its own agenda anyway?
This raises an important question, and the text presents the Elia case neutrally as a policy decision made without consultation. But UN Special Rapporteur Natsa Lagania explicitly warns about the exact danger you are highlighting.
What does she say?
She points out that states frequently fall into the trap of performative dialogue.
Performative dialogue.
Yes. Engaging only with the largest, most numerically significant, or most politically expedient groups. The state sets up an assembly to secure a photo op, or to legitimize a pre-existing agenda, rather than genuinely facilitating freedom of belief.
So it's just window dressing.
Exactly. When a government bypasses its own consultative bodies, it ignores the autonomy of those communities. The mechanism of trust breaks down entirely, breeding deep cynicism.
I can imagine.
It transforms dialogue from a bridge into a tool for surveillance or management.
So if states are cherry-picking who they talk to and treating it like a PR exercise, we really need to ask exactly who is missing from the table right now.
A lot of people.
Because if the table is only set for the powerful, it's not a dialogue, it's an echo chamber.
And the critical flaw in the traditional model of interfaith dialogue is that historically it has been an exchange exclusively between elites.
Right.
And traditional religious leadership across almost all major global faiths is deeply patriarchal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You look at the photos of these historic global summits, and it is overwhelmingly older men in robes.
Yes. And Dr. Aram, who we discussed earlier regarding the COVID-19 response, she is a laywoman who has risen to leadership.
Which is rare in these settings.
Very. She notes in the report that it requires massive intentional investment to get laywomen and youth into these spaces. If state just says, send us your leaders, the traditional hierarchy will send the people at the top.
The same guys who have always been there.
Exactly. You won't hear from the people who actually sustain the daily heart of the community life.
And when you actually do include them, the entire dynamic of the conversation shifts. The report shares this brilliant anecdote about a civil society initiative leading up to the 2004 U.S. elections. It was organized by the Pluralism Project.
Right. They gathered women from a vast array of national organizations. Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, the Muslim Women's League, the Sikh Coalition.
All in one room. And what did they find when they bypassed the male theologians and put these women in a room together?
What happened?
A representative from the National Council of Jewish Women stood up and listed out their core advocacy issues: childcare, domestic violence, gun control, and school prayer.
Okay.
And she pointed out that these are the exact same pragmatic issues that the Sikh women, the Muslim women, the Christian and Buddhist women were fighting for in their own communities.
Wow.
When women were brought to the table, the abstract theological differences just faded into the background, and the shared practical concerns of human flourishing took center stage.
That practical shift is so vital. And the exclusion we are talking about isn't solely based on gender either. It is heavily influenced by Western institutional biases.
How so?
Dr. Sambe pointed this out regarding the African context. He noted that many African independent churches are frequently excluded from national and regional ecumenical bodies.
Why? Do they have radically different theology?
Not necessarily.
Ugh.
They're excluded simply because they haven't been officially recognized by Western established
Be
churches.
kidding.
No, they don't fit the European architectural or organizational model of what a church should look like. Because of that, they are locked out of the conversation in their own regions.
That's incredibly frustrating.
It is. We have to abandon what academic Elizabeth Shackman Hurd calls the harmful religion narrative.
The harmful religion narrative.
Yeah. It's the ingrained assumption that if a faith group is indigenous, grassroots, and doesn't resemble a traditional Western institution, it must be inherently dangerous, a cult, or a threat that requires state surveillance.
So they're punished for not looking European.
Basically. Respecting the dignity of indigenous initiatives on their own terms is a prerequisite for genuine interconvictional dialogue.
Okay, so the traditional power structures are slow to adapt. They are patriarchal, they are Western-centric, and states often use them for PR.
That's the reality, yes.
If that's the reality, how do we future-proof this dialogue? How do we bypass the old gatekeepers entirely so the next generation doesn't inherit this mess? The sources point straight to two things: the classroom and our digital screens.
Education and technology. They are the two most potent delivery mechanisms for human narrative.
Let's start with education.
Dr. Gill makes a strong push in the report for what she terms interreligious learning. She argues that we need to expose young people to humanizing narratives to actively cultivate empathy.
And she is very clear that this does not mean reading dry comparative textbooks about world religions.
Definitely not.
Right. She suggests using a vast treasure of storytelling, everything from the sacred myths of different traditions to global literature. She literally mentions pairing ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita with modern classics like The Little Prince.
The mechanism behind this is empathy building. When a student reads these texts side by side, they see that the search for meaning, the experience of loss, and the desire for the transcendent are universal human endeavors.
The human condition.
Right. The vocabulary and rituals change, but the underlying human condition remains the same. It teaches young people to listen in order to comprehend, rather than listening merely to criticize or defend their own identity.
And taking that concept into the digital world is where the mechanics get really fascinating.
Yes, the tech side.
Dr. Sambe and his team at the Timbuktu Institute are doing exactly this. They aren't just publishing academic papers, they actually partnered with tech giants like Google and Meta to fight online hate speech.
Which is incredible.
But how does a regional institute in Africa help a massive algorithm run by a tech company in California?
Well, AI algorithms are incredibly powerful at recognizing patterns, but they are notoriously bad at cultural context.
They miss the nuance.
Exactly. An algorithm built in Silicon Valley cannot easily detect sarcasm, local slang, or historical dog whistles in a Senegalese or Malian dialect.
That makes total sense.
The Timbuktu Institute realized that the tech giants have the processing power, but local institutes have the cultural translation matrix. They feed the AI the necessary cultural context to actually moderate and flag extremism online before it spreads.
Wow.
They also launched a YouTube channel specifically designed to combat radicalization with localized counter-narratives.
That is brilliant. It's like installing a cultural translation chip into the algorithm. And Dr. Sambe had a realization about this that is just so stark. He said, buying a school is cheaper than a secondhand tank.
Buying a school is cheaper than a secondhand tank. It is the ultimate argument for proactive investment in human capital.
Rather than waiting for things to explode.
Right. Nations spend astronomical fortunes on reactive security measures, on military hardware, border surveillance, and defense, when the most effective, enduring counterterrorism measure is actually education and structural dialogue.
So what does this all mean for us? It means we have to actively treat education like a mental spam filter for the next generation.
A mental spam filter, I like that.
We are using ancient stories like The Little Prince or sacred myths to build empathy, and we are using modern tech platforms to deliver counter-narratives. We are trying to equip kids to flag manipulative, demonizing narratives and send them to the junk folder before those ideas ever take root in their actions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, education isn't just about memorizing rights or dates. It is about building critical capacity.
Building the mental muscle.
Yes, it's about teaching a young person to be media savvy enough to recognize when a politician or a pundit is instrumentalizing their fear of the other and giving them the intellectual resilience to reject it.
Bringing all these global, local, and digital threads together, I want to remind you, the listener, why this matters to your daily life.
It's not just abstract policy.
No, not at all. Whether you are sitting in a corporate boardroom, negotiating a contract, or voting in a local municipal election, or just scrolling through your social media feed, the way your community navigates these interconvictional differences directly dictates your reality.
Absolutely.
It shapes the zoning laws in your neighborhood, it impacts your physical security, and it determines the overall health and vibrancy of the society you live in. You are a participant in this ecosystem, whether you realize it or not.
And as we consider our individual roles in this ecosystem, I want to leave you with a final thought. It builds on a very brief but profound observation made by Dr. Sambe in the report.
What's the thought?
Well, we spend so much time in these dialogues trying to build interfaith bridges based on our shared strengths. We look for our highest moral values, our grandest visions of world peace, and we try to connect at the absolute apex of our beliefs.
We put our best foot forward. We lead with our armor on.
Exactly. But Dr. Sambe observed that what is actually turning Africa into a real international community is vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Yes. Facing a pandemic like COVID-19, facing severe physical insecurity, facing a rapidly changing climate that ruins crops. These crises strip away the hierarchy entirely. They make us completely equal in our fragility.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
So it leaves us to ponder. We spend all our energy trying to unite over our shared power and righteousness. But what if our most authentic common ground isn't our strength at all? What if the ultimate shortcut to mutual understanding is actually embracing our shared, fragile human vulnerability?
That reframes the entire human experience. Maybe our vulnerability isn't a bug in the operating system. Maybe it is the exact feature we need to finally connect with one another. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the code, and we'll see you next time.